Hi, thanks for joining me for another Technical Tuesday. I'm back at the very frosty 48 Hudson. If anyone missed it, last weekend when we had it open for Festive at 48, this one is for you and all of you who I told could not climb the ladder into the garret. As everyone came in, we kept saying how the garret of the historic Dutch house is really the best view in the entire building, where you can really see in and see the rafters, and a huge part of really how the building was identified as Dutch. And then, of course, I wouldn't let anybody up to see it because I'm just mean that way. So I figured I had to be nice and share it all with you. So I'm up here in the garret with pigeons. It's nice and frosty. You can see into the big addition behind me, and the garret's behind me. So we're going to flip this view because you don't want to see me. You want to see the building. So here we are in the attic. Yay! Look at how beautiful all of that is. All right, so I'm going to walk around and pretty much just kind of point out what I'm seeing here, other than the pigeon feathers, because no one really needs to know about that. So, all right, you'll notice it. You know what that is. So let's see, I'm all the way back here, just to kind of give anyone an idea where I am. This is the back wall of the house. You can see in here, there's the addition there where we had some stuff set up. Here's the upper floor of the warehouse that no one really ever gets to see unless you scale the ladder and swing your way under the pigeon dropping covered beam into the garret. So that's that space that no one gets to see. And then this little bit here is a bit of wall for the back of the historic house. Here's all the framing. Look at all that. Yep, all this part of the back wall. Bits of it are from 1790 when the building was widened. Bits of it are potentially from 1728. The pieces that are definitely 1728 are the roof rafters, and we're going to get up close and personal with a couple. Let's see, where's a safe spot to stand that doesn't have a hole in it? Here we go. Okay, so I'm walking kind of forward in the building, so we can take a look here. Here is one of those rafters, and you can kind of see that they're not totally squared off. They're almost like a log that's had the bark pulled off and been roughly shaped, most likely with an adze. There we go, all the way up. And so that's what's basically holding this roof together. Let me see if I turn around here and look up. So this is the third rafter back. You can see there's a notch for where those collar ties were. Because of course the angle I'm standing, you can't really tell that that is actually on a very steep angle and not facing straight out. The piece of wood up there that you can see that's obviously new, there is a bit of dimensional lumber that we've thrown in here, like this beam here, obviously to hold it together, so it continues to stand for another 300 years. But yeah, so there's all these wonderful notches. We've got another little one all the way down here, same rafter. Let's pull some of this back. Okay, so here we go. So we can see one of these notches really closely right here. Obviously there's lots of wear and tear on it, so you can tell it's been exposed for a long time. It has that same patina as the rest of it. Here's some of the substrate. You can see that there. Part of the Historic Structures Report is going to tell us how much of this fabric is from 1728. Are all of these nice, big, wide planks, which presumably I would say are from 1728, but obviously we would want to confirm that. They have lots of layers of paint and whitewash, so we can determine as well what the initial finish of this space was. As I called it a garret, we had a couple questions on what is a garret. It's not an attic, and what's the difference? So a garret is similar to an attic in that it's the top part of a building. It typically has, I'd say almost like knee walls, which are over here. They're these kind of short, stubby little walls. So you've got the angle of the roof in there. But the main difference between a garret and an attic is that a garret was actually inhabited space. So there was bedrooms up there, or some kind of living space. It wasn't really nicely finished per se. But it was inhabitable. It wasn't totally untreated, unfinished storage space. You know how like when we stuff our all of our junk upstairs in our attic, that's kind of the difference. There's nobody living up there, just grandma's trunk of photos and mom's wedding dress. People were actually, or most likely, sleeping up here. Okay, so let's look at a few more rafters while we're up here. I'm going to duck under here. I'm on the west side of the building. I should have pointed that out earlier. So this is all the way toward the edge of the wall. And you can see this is actually where a gutter was, between 48 and 50. And you can see because of years of water pooling there, the edge of that rafter is in very sad shape. So that's going to be a part of the next phase, is doing some Dutchman repairs to get this roof ready to be Dutch again. Okay. And here we're going to real close up. Here's some of those nubs that I kept pointing out. This is that fourth rafter that I'm constantly pointing out, and you can see the fifth one behind it. Those little pieces that were just kind of chopped off, those are the telltale collar ties. And remember from our architectural history lesson, collar ties are the horizontal pieces that hold the roof together. So those are little nubs of what really held the roof together, and that was how they kind of identified that, yes, this is a Dutch building. Yes, it has a gable that faces the front, but not all front-facing gables are Dutch. How does that go? Most Dutch buildings have front-facing gables, but not all front-facing gables are Dutch. There we go. So this didn't have that right pitch, but once they got up and looked at the collar ties, it was kind of one of those aha sort of things where it gave them the clues they needed to figure out that, yeah, this really is a real Dutch building, all because of those teeny tiny little nubs. All right, let's keep walking because this is just cool and fun to be up here. You can tell there's been lots of additions, things tacked on. We see all kinds of wood that's basically been slapped on. This looks like a chunk of the floorboard. We have found several of these downstairs that looks like they've been pulled up from somewhere else and just kind of tacked on elsewhere and reused. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's what that was. We'll get real close here. There's definitely something written on here. We'll have to get a photo of it and see if anyone can figure out what that actually is underneath all of that. We're going to go with schmutz on that one. Okay, so I'm just moving forward toward the front of the building. And you can see here there's another piece notched out where there was potentially another bit of framing attached to it. On the angle, it doesn't seem quite right for a lower collar tie, but you never know. All the way back in there, have a quick look. And you can see lots of nail holes. Things have been added and removed and added and removed for just about 300 years. There we go, all the way up to the peak. All right, and now let's move closer toward the front wall. Okay, so we see here there's beadboard tacked to the front. We've got this big door window that's just hanging open. All kinds of framing. What's original, what's not. The majority of this is not original. We believe the majority of the framing from when it was Dutch has been removed. There may be small portions of it, but most of it is not. The opening is much bigger than it should have been. The beadboard definitely would have gotten added later. Remember, the pitch changed, so all of the cladding you see here reflects and fits what is currently here, which is not original. But still pretty old. I mean, 1790, let's stop splitting hairs here. In the United States, 1790 is pretty old. This was still done before the Tenbrook House was constructed, so even the changes to this, the roof being the way it is, still older than... Okay. Let's see, let's get a little closer in here. This is awesome. So you've got all kinds of stuff in here. We've got layers of awesome fiberglass bat, obviously, 20th century. Someone's trying to do something. We've got little bits of paper. There even look like there could be a few pieces of either oilcloth or fabric tucked in there. There is so much here for when we really get going on our historic structures report. One of the key components of that is to really do a thorough existing conditions, documenting everything that's here, and there's so much here to document. So we'll definitely be doing lots of tours, taking lots of photographs, and then there's going to be a beautiful book for everyone to take a look at with lots of photos and things, explaining what all of the stuff that we're finding and seeing is. So much potential for this. All right, let's keep going. This piece here that you can see straight across, I'm wondering if it's a bit older. It has that same patina that we saw further back with the layers of whitewash. There looks to be a bit of whitewash, a bit of gray paint. We did see, obviously, a lot of gray paint. You can see it here, too. On the beadboard, which was definitely 20th century, but this has a bit of an older patina to it, in addition to pigeon droppings, which are definitely 21st century additions to the patina of wood. unfortunately, my flash isn't really working. It doesn't work with the camera, so you can't see all the way up into the peak right there. We'll take a look a bit further back where there's a bit more light. But one of the really cool things about the peak is you can actually see this little gap where the ridgeline is and where the pieces should have met together. So we'll take a look at that in a second. All right, let's see here. This piece here is really cool. So, okay, so this here, hopefully it's not too blurry on your end, is one of the cores they took when they did the dendrochronology. And we have a report that goes with it. We'll have to, I think it's posted on our website. If not, I'll make sure we have it up so you guys can check it out. For those of you who've heard me say this dozens and dozens of times and are in the biz, so you know, the dendrochronology is tree ring dating, and it's how we firmly dated the building to 1728, and they helpfully marked all of the holes in pink chalk when they came in and took the cores. So what they did was they took this funky little drill bit and just kind of drilled it in and took a big chunk of it out, and then they lined up all of the tree rings with a library of tree rings. And that's what gave us the age. So that's what that is, and that's why it's covered in pink chalk. Definitely not original to the building, but it does tell us a lot about it. You can also see a ghost there where something was definitely attached. That divot in there is not big enough to be a mortise for a tenon, but definitely interesting, and I'm sure has a story to tell. You can see here there's little chunks there too that have been nailed on, all at odd little angles. I mean, little bits that look like they've been either sawed or broken off. There's just so many things. Every time I come in here, especially the garret space, there's always something new that we see, whether it's hardware that has fallen onto the floor or markings on the ceiling. One of the last times we were in here, we saw there was something written in chalk underneath the floor by one of the jamless fireplaces. And so now we have to figure out what exactly it was saying. It was something supply, but it's definitely not Saul's. So there's always something new to discover. All right, so I'm walking a little bit back toward the rear of the building again. You can see again another notch for collar ties. So this would have actually had two sets of collar ties. If you go on our 3D tour that's on our website, we actually have the Dutch names for both of them because each one has a different name. Can I remember them? Of course not, because that would have been helpful. But it would have had two. It would have had one that would have acted as a floor, and then an upper one that would have been a little bit higher to help hold it together, because this roof was really tall. So now that we can see up here all the way toward the peak a little bit, so fun fact, this peak is actually lower than where it would have been when the pitch was steeper. So they actually raised the roof up a half story to give it a full second story. But they actually lowered where the ridge line was, the kind of high point, the peak there. They actually lowered it because the roof pitch was lower. So the whole building got taller floor-wise, but it actually got slightly shorter if you measure it from the ground to the ridge line. So this is actually a bit shorter than where it originally was. Okay. I would say duck and watch your heads, but thankfully you don't have to, and I'm short enough that we're good. Okay, there is a skylight here that has been covered up, not original to the building, but we do see some older timber framing with it, which I find a bit curious. But they would not have had something like that there. That would have been grounds for lots of leaks, so that would not have been original to the building. If there's any questions, please post them. I don't think I can see comments or whatnot because I'm still a Luddite and am terrible with technology. So please feel free to post your questions, comments, whatnot, and we can certainly answer them. Because this is just really cool, but also really interesting and obviously begs questions. So by all means, ask away. All right, so I'm almost back to where I started. This is the east wall that we've been looking at kind of on the way back, moving around. Holes and pigeon droppings. Thankfully, no more remains. Yes, the sleepy pigeons have been dealt with for all of you who are so curiously wondering. Let's see. Okay, and a few more collar tie little nubs that are over there. There we go. That one's close. So this is not quite the back wall. It's the rafter just before, and we see more little stumps sticking out. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much it. So we'll open it up for questions, comments, concerns, and whatnot. As I had mentioned briefly, this is going to be part of Phase 3. We are wrapping up Phase 2, which was getting ready, really, for Phase 3. So we did the masonry in the basement, so we now have a foundation to support our wall. we have the wall now with our timber framing restoration work that we've done, which is pretty much right below over here where that line is. See where the cable's going down? That's pretty much where the wall is, a floor down. So all of this is getting ready. We now have an east wall again. And as we wrap up our masonry repairs and a few other things to finish up our grant, we'll be able to start looking at how do we put all of these rafters carefully back into place. When they did this and raised the roof up and split it out, it stayed in place. They did not take the whole thing apart, disassemble it, reassemble it. They did it in place. So one of our engineering challenges is how do we reverse engineer that in the 21st century and do it with all kinds of modern technology they didn't even have available, and not break it, because they didn't break it the first time. So more on that to come. Thank you all for joining me. I'll stop rambling and let everyone get on with their Tuesday. Stay warm. It's nippy out there, but enjoy the sunshine. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful week to you all.